All right. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Jason Larson, and I'm the Director of Content here at the International Institute for Analytics. I'm your host for today's session. Welcome to today's webinar, Embracing a Product Orientation for Enterprise Analytics and AI. In case you're new to the International Institute for Analytics, or IIA, as we like to call it, we are a research and advisory firm co-founded by Tom Davenport, who is joining us today, and CEO Jack Phillips. We work with companies to grow their data and analytics capabilities and to successfully make the transition to data-driven decision-making, advanced analytics, and AI. Today's discussion is part of our ongoing series of webinars designed to highlight important concepts, trends, and strategies in the world of data, business analytics, and artificial intelligence. So our clients really rely on us to provide unbiased insights and a range of perspectives from our network of independent analytics experts and practitioners. For more information on our three service lines, please visit our website and check us out. All right, so before we dive into the presentation, let's go over a few housekeeping items. You can submit questions or comments via the chat window. We definitely encourage questions and comments. We will have time for Q&A at the end of the session, and we will answer those questions time permitting. A recorded version of this webinar will be available and emailed out after the presentation as well, so be on the lookout for that. Okay, so without further ado, we are delighted to welcome Tom Davenport and Manav Misra as our featured speakers today. So Tom is, as I said, the co-founder and also an advisor of IIA. He teaches at several distinguished colleges and universities. His most recent book is The AI Advantage, and he has 3 books on different aspects of AI coming out this year. And Manav is the Chief Data and Analytics Officer for Regions Bank. At Regions, Manav oversees the company's data strategy and enterprise data governance, which includes leveraging data and analytics to improve customer experience, enhance risk management, and drive growth across the business, among many other things that Manav does there. So many analytics leaders and teams are turning to product thinking to shepherd enterprise analytics and AI. And we wanted to address this subject. So in today's webinar, Tom and Manav will have an interactive discussion breaking down the benefits of developing a product orientation and explore in detail Manav's approach, best practices, and lessons he's learned at Regions Bank. It really is a pretty cool case study. So we're in for a treat today. So welcome to Tom and Manav. And Tom, I'll pass it over to you to get us started.
Thanks, Jason. You didn't mention about Manav that he used to be a professor, but then he decided to get a real job. So, so I wanted to just say a few minutes about why I'm interested in this subject and how I heard about Manav and Regions on this topic. So I think the first thing that I wrote about this issue, or at least the problem that this product orientation can address, was for IIA. Actually, you can search through their blog posts if you want to. In 2019, I wrote a little article called, or blog post called, "What's Your Deployment Score?" arguing that too often people working in analytics and AI were focused on kind of developing algorithms, but not so focused on actually deploying their models into any sort of production environment. And I think in that blog post, I talked about some organizations I'd encountered recently who said their deployment score was 0% of their models were deployed. And then I found the opposite extreme organization where the deployment percentage was 100, and obviously that's preferable. I'm not sure that it needs to be 100, but it certainly needs to be higher than it does. And since then, I've done a fair amount of research and writing on this deployment issue. It's a little worse for AI, I would say, than it is for more traditional forms of analytics, because I think too often organizations view AI projects as, some sort of science experiment where they need to do pilots or proofs of concept for quite a while before they actually deploy anything. And this is a substantial problem, because if you don't deploy, you don't get any economic benefit from these capabilities, analytics and AI capabilities. So it I think could send us back into another of the many AI winters that we've had if we don't address this problem. Now, the good news, I think, is that things are starting to get a little bit better in this regard. I have seen a lot of survey results, some of which I've been involved in, that see that display a deployment score that's quite low. I think a Venture Beat one said 87% of data science models aren't deployed. Another one that I was involved in said only 20% of AI models get deployed. But lately it's getting a little bit better. However, one recent survey for KD Nuggets, which is a data scientist oriented site, was still quite low. I think it was in the 27% range. Companies are realizing that this problem exists and are starting to address it. I was particularly excited when I was on a call with a number of chief data and analytics officers, and Manav was one of the people involved. And Manav, maybe you remember, I don't exactly remember how it came up, but he said, we have this product orientation and it's working quite well, and we have a number of products that have really generated substantial revenue for the bank. Regions is I guess fair to say a regional bank. I was born in Birmingham, Alabama, where Regions is based, so I got excited about that. Then I met Manav, and he said, yeah, I live in Jefferson County, where I was born, but then it turns out he lives in Jefferson County, Colorado. So he lives and works in Jefferson County, but they're two widely disparate states. Anyway, they seem to be doing a great job with this, and he was nice enough to talk to me about it for an IIA blog post, soon to be part of a research brief on this topic, and for this webinar. So Manav, maybe I'll ask you to start out by saying, what was it that made you want to adopt this product management approach when you came to Regions?
Yeah, Tom, thank you for inviting me first. It's great to be in a forum with you. I've definitely respected a lot of the work you've done, and having a common academic base there is definitely a plus. So Tom, I joined Regions about a little less than 4 years ago, and I came to Regions. I brought a lot of my experience with me. And part of that experience was in academia, doing research on machine learning, neural networks, and then teaching, and really communicating to students the value of software engineering and the discipline that brings to developing software. And
so
then,
you actually lived through some of those AI winters yourself, I suspect.
I did, yes. Very much so. I did my PhD, and it was the hottest field, and then I was in academia, and it was so. But then I left academia and was part of a couple of companies that built enterprise-grade software. And so I got to see that academic discipline being put to practice. And then finally, the last startup that I was a co-founder of, we had a consulting practice, and we worked with some of the largest companies, helping them look at their big data and advanced analytics strategies. And what became apparent to me was that the way data and analytics organizations in these companies were approaching the problem resulted in a suboptimal solution, that they weren't really maximizing the value that they could deliver to the organization. And part of it was that, the data scientists or AI folks were focused on saying, hey, here's this cool thing that I read about and I've hacked it together, and go ahead, see if you can use it. Going back to your deployment score problem. And the other part of it was that the business really didn't quite understand what these people did. And so they would come up with just small incremental asks. And neither of these resulted in a complete solution that could be taken to solve a real problem and deliver value to it. So when I came to Regions, I took my learnings from the enterprise software development area, and a lot of that discipline was applied to the problems that we were looking at. So, what is really the problem that we're solving? Do we have a business case for it? Is there an end customer who will be using it? How will they engage with this? What kind of UI do we need? We had to think through all of these questions, everything that somebody who's building an enterprise software product has to think through. And so I thought that would be a good model to bring to Regions and apply it to the kinds of problems we were looking at.
So it wasn't that Regions was necessarily any worse at this than anybody else. It was just, that's the tendency in analytics and data science for people to want to work on cool algorithms and cool programs that include those algorithms and not really focus on the business side of things. I think it sounds like you don't, if you're in an organization that's at least, no worse than anybody else, it's still useful to adopt this approach. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And, as I mentioned, when I was, especially during my consulting days, we were working with some of the largest banks, some of the largest insurance companies, retailers, and this was an all-pervasive problem. And even now, I have other CDOs who come to me and say, I have this large team, a few hundred people, and I struggle to show the value that we're delivering. And it's because of this dynamic that exists, that they are either just doing small things and then handing them over without thought of how it gets actually deployed, how it gets used, the change management that goes into it. Everything that an enterprise software company does really well, that's what we're looking to do. And as I was bringing on people for my team, I had to change this mindset. I'll tell you an interesting story. When I hired somebody about 15 years ago in my company to focus on large analytics efforts, his attitude, as he described it, is data scientists are doctors. We do the high-end stuff, and then we need nurses to actually go and get that, to function. And I had to really change that mindset in my team. We had to, whenever we were looking at building a solution, we had to think about how it would get deployed, how it would get used, what is the business value it would deliver. And if we didn't do that, we weren't even going to jump onto something.
Yeah, it sounds just as obnoxious among data scientists as an attitude as it does among doctors, right? Did you immediately start hiring people to play this kind of product manager role? And if so, what kinds of people were they, and what were you looking for?
Yeah, so this was part of my initial vision that I presented to the senior managers at Regions to get that buy-in. Now, this was a skill set that really didn't exist either in banking or in the general analytics world. And so I had to really carve this out. And as I was interviewing somebody to lead this effort, I had to look for somebody who may not have done this in their prior lives, but at least had that mindset and was excited about taking this on. And so this kind of unicorn role that we created, we call them data product partners, because they have to build these products that we call data products, but they also have to act like partners in a consulting company, in that they have to build relationships with the business leaders. They have to really understand what their key priorities are, what their pain points are, what are the areas that we can help them with, everything that a partner in a consulting company does. And then they have to marshal the resources, both from within my organization, but from technology, from the business itself, to put together a team. So they're the quarterback that puts together the right team to build out this product. And then they become the day-to-day owner of the processes. So we use an agile approach. So they run sprints, they manage the expectations with our quote-unquote internal customers of the product, and they lead it all the way from requirements to delivery of the product, but then also think about how it's going to be adopted by the end users, how are we going to measure that usage, is it indeed delivering the value that we expected it to deliver, maintain a backlog of features, requests, bug fixes that we have to do. Again, everything that a product manager in a software company would do.
So that, as you said, that sounds like a pretty rare breed that can do all of those things. I mean, what kinds of backgrounds did you look for? I mean, how did you know that you had a good data product partner?
Yeah, and we've had, our data product partner team is exceptional, number one, but number two, have very disparate backgrounds that we've been able to hire from. Like I said, I wasn't looking for experience because there really wasn't a whole lot of experience in this area. I was looking for talent, capability, and mindset. And so some of the folks we've hired are people that actually came from the business. So they were in the business at Regions, but had this mindset of, hey, I want to figure out how we can do things better in the business using advanced analytics. So they had a deep understanding of the business, maybe didn't really have as deep an understanding on the analytics and AI side, but were willing to learn and then were willing to become that translator between the business and our data and analytics team. And other people we've hired have more of a technology background, have come from a product management mindset, but may not have worked with analytics necessarily or with the specific businesses we were working for. But it's just that attitude and the eagerness to learn and apply this mindset. So we have to train and get them to the point where they could be effective, but they've been tremendous in being able to bridge that gap between the business and the data analytics team.
I hadn't thought of this before, but when you and I talked, we discussed at least one of your data product partners has gone on to become a chief data officer elsewhere. And in a way, this sounds like a kind of a lower level version of the chief data and analytics officer job in a sense, right? Because, so I don't know, a lot of companies think, oh, I'll put a data scientist in this role. Doesn't typically work out very well because a lot of those relationship development skills and so on are almost the most important thing in your job too, I would imagine.
Absolutely. So I spend a lot of time with our business leaders and really, understand what they're going through, walk a mile in their shoes, so to speak. And you have to have those skills to be able to, number one, understand their problems in their language, but also to explain how data and analytics can address specific problems in very simple terms. And that's something that you have to develop over time. You have to have that skill set to be successful. Certainly in the data product partner role that I was describing, but as you're saying, in a chief data and analytics officer role today, you have to have those skills to be successful.
Well, I hope nobody on this call raids your organization to try to hire their next chief data and analytics officer. But how did this go over with the, I guess, the group that probably previously thought of itself as the quarterbacks, the data scientists? Yeah,
so there was a shifting of mindset that had to happen. And I was pretty clear to the folks that were there at Regions that you had to adopt that mindset, or this may not be the right kind of team for you. So we were able to essentially find other places, either at Regions, and some people certainly left Regions as well, because they didn't quite fit into this mindset and model. But it was a shift of mindset within the data science group and data group overall, but then also on the business side. So another thing that I had to shift in their mindset was a lot of them would come and say, look, yeah, you're trying to do all these cool things, but get our data in order before you attack all those things, right? And I had to really get them to the point where they understood that certainly data quality, data management was critically important to be able to build out a data product. But if I only focused on that, I would never be able to show the value early. And so what I've been able to do is to take each data product, and for that data product, build out the data environment, the data governance, the data quality, put the tools in place, put the processes in place, which over time has developed into a very solid enterprise data management program. But it wouldn't have happened if that was the only thing we were focusing on, because after a while, people would get impatient and say, well, you haven't done anything for the business. And then, I'd be looking for another job.
I was going to say, you probably wouldn't still be employed there if you'd focused on that. I was with a couple of chief data officers yesterday. One was just chief data officer. She was very focused on data management issues, and she was talking about what an incredibly hard slog it is to just improve the data. The other one, I think, was the chief data and analytics officer, and he really he believed that data management was important, but he did it in the context of use cases that actually had value to the company. So what other kinds of changes did you have to make in order to make all this feasible? You had to change some attitudes on the business side and the data scientist side. Anything else that comes to mind?
Well, the other thing that was absolutely critical for success was sponsorship and buy-in from the senior business leaders. So I was really fortunate in being hired by our chief operating officer at that time, who bought into this vision that I laid out, and both our COO and our CEO gave me the runway to get this built out the right way. So one of the aspects of taking a product-oriented approach is that it takes some time to get this flywheel going. You have to really pull together the right teams. You have to find that first right data product that you're going to build out. You have to start kind of delivering on that promise. And until all of that happens, you have to have leaders who have faith that you are going to get there, and don't get impatient about where you're at in that journey. So I was extremely fortunate to have that sponsorship very early on, and then we were able to fortunately deliver the first set of products, and then that flywheel started to really turn, and we got the energy behind it, and more demands coming in from the other business leaders around us.
I guess coming back a little bit, Brian O'Neill, who focuses on this issue a lot from a kind of a design perspective, said in the chat, continually making cool stuff nobody uses is a recipe for eventually losing good talent and them getting the boot. Knowing how it will get deployed, how it will get used is everyone's job. But in a way, this makes it somewhat easier for the data scientists, say, who have often been called unicorns, but mostly are not unicorns. In a way, this lets them focus a little bit more on what they care about, right? Because there's somebody else who's looking at the big picture and the translation and the relationships and all that stuff. Did you find that to be the case?
Yes, but we had to make sure that the data scientists were, in the meetings, listening in on the conversations, had that proximity, so that they could really understand the problem they were solving. Plus, the energy that a data scientist gets by being in a meeting with, let's say, the head of private wealth management, who then says, "Wow, this is really nice. My advisors can actually use this." Is just tremendous, so that energy then feeds back and it gets them energized, and they do great work from there on. So certainly they can focus on what they're really good at, but it's important for them to be close to and hear feedback directly and be able to absorb that positive energy coming back at them.
They have to at least sort of respect the product management orientation, and probably good motivator for them too, to see their models get successfully applied. It's kind of not very satisfying to develop great models that don't get used, right? Yeah.
That's right. And one other point on Brian's comment, the design aspect is something that is very important to us. So we leverage, over time, I've also built a visualization team. And this is not your standard just reporting team. These are folks that actually think about the best way to visualize information and bring to bear the research that's been done in that space. That plus we also work closely with our digital UX team, who designs our mobile and web front ends to the Regions apps. Because what we really want to ensure is that a bad UI shouldn't be a reason why an end user doesn't start to get value from the data products we build.
Sure. Well, can you just say a little bit about how this is working well? What are some of the indicators of success?
Yeah. So one of the tenets I laid out for my team early on was that we have to measure everything that we do. So we measure a baseline of where things are at right now. As we build out our data product, we instrument it so that we have the ability to see who's using it, how it's being used, what kind of if it's a revenue generating product, what kind of revenue it's generating. This is done in conjunction with the business. So it isn't we coming and saying, well, this product generated X revenue, and they're saying, well, we don't see that in our business. We jointly measure and report on these kinds of value that we're delivering together. So it's a hand-in-hand joint statement that we make. So based on all those measurements, we can see the kind of impact we're having on the bank. In addition to that, we make it a really important aspect of what we do to broadcast and tell the rest of the bank what the impact is. Because otherwise, we could be making a big impact, but if nobody really understands that or hears about it, that positive feedback loop and the flywheel just doesn't turn at the velocity that we want it to. So every quarter, we publish a newsletter to the bank, which talks about what data products we're working on and what kind of impact we're having.
Do you have a chief marketing officer for data and analytics at Regions, or?
Well, so each of us is in that business. So I tell my direct reports that each of them has to have this hat on and keep thinking about what we're going to be communicating about the value of work we're doing. And they do a very good job in terms of taking that and then packaging it and then sending it out to the rest of the bank.
There's a question that I wanted to ask and also just came in on the chat. You are pretty clear that this product orientation means you work on products that are going to have a substantial impact for the business. Well, presumably there are still some things that people would like in terms of analytics and AI solutions that have less impact on the business, but may be useful. What do you do in that case? And have you moved toward a self-service orientation in a big way for that kind of thing?
That's a great question because, again, what I saw in a lot of data and analytics organizations during my consulting days was that they ended up becoming a service bureau for the rest of the organization. And they would just wait for requests to come in. These were typically small incremental asks. They would run around, get that request met, send it out, then wait for the next one. And again, they just weren't able to maximize the value that they could deliver to the organization. So from the onset, my goal was to enable data scientists across the bank to be able to get self-service and answers to data-driven questions that they had without having to come to a central entity to get those back and forth answers. Now, that takes some time. You have to have the right tool set that enables self-service. You have to have training. You have to have a mindset shift. All of that, takes some time, and we're certainly not there yet. So our goal is to enable self-service completely, but we're still on a journey. So in the meantime, we've defined the kind of work we do in my organization in three categories. So the first one is data products, and that's what we've been talking about. The second one we call services. So this is like a consulting group going in and providing services to one of the business units to enable them to get to where they want. And then the third one is capabilities, and that's building the core capabilities. So this includes data literacy, training, best practice communication. It includes setting up the tool sets for them to be able to do self-service. So it's essentially, training them to fish rather than catching them a fish and giving them to them. Now, this is a smaller percentage of the bandwidth of my organization, and the goal is to just keep enabling the rest of the organization to get to that point. Our focus is these high-value data products that we want to build. So the services portion of our work stream often is designed for us to learn more about what pain points they're facing, address those initial pain points, but then convert that into a data product in the long run that can benefit them significantly more.
So you're grooming them, as they say, for a data product.
Yes, exactly.
And no big complaints about Manav's group is just too focused on, catching the big fish, and I can't figure out how to make my Excel spreadsheet work correctly.
Well, and again, so I laid out a journey for us, which was a multi-year journey. And I had mentioned early on that our first focus will be data products. Our second focus would be getting our enterprise data management pieces done using data products as the driving force. And then the third focus would be enabling all data citizens. So there is some, anxiety in terms of, are we making enough progress on that side? We are indeed getting there, but, certainly some people in the organization would like an even higher velocity on that third piece there.
And that's just as much a culture change as it is a skills related issue, right? Embedding the motivation and so on for making data-driven decisions and that kind of thing. Yeah. Exactly.
And it's a culture change on the requester side, saying, look, we'll teach you, here's a set of tools, here's the data set we've put in. So from a tools standpoint, we've put in a data catalog, we've put in a data lineage tool so they can trace back where data is coming from. We're in the midst of getting a full data quality tool in place. We have an orchestration tool for data pipeline creation. We're now in the process of putting together a collaborative platform that allows data insight generation and communication between parts of the business. So that tool set is getting fleshed out fully, and then the training and the mindset shift is happening in parallel to get them to the point where they can get all the answers that they need on their own.
So that was interesting that you had that sort of three-part program with the citizen one being the longer term one. I mean, if you were going into an organization again, a separate organization from Regions, and they asked you, okay, that sounds great, how long is it going to take you to do all three? What would you say now, do you think?
I think we've made tremendous progress in the 3.5 years that I've been here. It's probably the fastest time to value here. I don't think for an organization our size, which is about 20,000 employees, certainly if you're a smaller organization with greater agility and the ability to, with not as much legacy stuff in place, you could move faster. And plus, if you were cloud native already, you would have greater agility to get to that end state faster. But given where we were at, I think this is probably the fastest that we could have gone without breaking too much. We broke some things along the way, but not too much.
You still have a job, sounds like.
Yeah.
and it helps so much to be able to point to those, those successful data products that everybody seems to be aware of because of your great marketing as well. Huh?
Yeah, and Tom, that was another star alignment piece that happened for me, that I needed the first data product to be this lighthouse product. And so it needed to be large enough, it needed to have enough of a financial impact, it needed to be something that the business was bought in, they had a true need for. And I was just fortunate that the corporate banking group had the need and a leader there who bought into this vision to say, yes, let's build out a data product for my relationship managers for commercial banking. Commercial banking traditionally has been a very much of a high touch, handshake, golf course kind of business. And we were able to really bring data to enhance that ability that our relationship managers already had to work with their clients, but now go into those conversations with a depth of understanding of what was happening with their business, and therefore it wasn't a complete discovery from the ground up. So I think that was very fortunate that we had a sponsor early on, and it was a data product that generated significant value out of the gate that I could then point others to, saying this is the kind of things that we can do.
Yeah, they've been traditionally underserved by analytics and AI groups, I would say, in part because they don't have as much data, right, as the consumer side of banks typically.
Well, certainly the consumer business has much more data, but you'd be surprised how much data they had, they didn't know about, and we were able to bring together in one place to then start showing them insights, which even the customer, when they go and talk to them, they say, wow, I didn't know that myself.
Oh, interesting. So do you, when you're picking these projects to work on, some of the highest value projects, one might argue, might be the ones with the least data, because I remember former CEO of Procter & Gamble used to say, I have a few big swing decisions during my tenure. Should I acquire Gillette or not? And there's no data about those kinds of big decisions. So do you seek those out anyway somehow, or do you typically focus on the ones that, we typically gravitate toward, the repetitive tactical decisions that have a lot of data typically and are easier to model?
Yeah, so again, we have a disciplined approach in terms of prioritizing what we'll take on and when we'll take that on. We go about it in terms of, what is the value it'll deliver, and it could be economic value, it could be strategic value. What is the feasibility of actually building out a product for this problem? And that feasibility analysis includes whether we have the data to be able to build out a solution using data and analytics. And then the third one is the complexity or the effort involved in building out something like this. So if it was going to take 6 years to do it, we probably would want to break that down and look at pieces of it rather than take that whole thing on. So we use that way to prioritize what we're going to take on and work on. Now, if it is a significant decision that our business has to make, like an M&A kind of decision, where we may not be able to build a model because there's not enough data, but we may be able to just bring enough data to them so that they have more insight as they go about making that decision. So we would get involved as a service, that second work stream that I described there. It may not be a product necessarily, but it'd be a service to them to be able to make that decision.
More a decision support kind of set of tools that rather than a analytics AI product. Yeah.
Exactly, and we've done that for our finance group. They've had certain kinds of decisions that they wanted to make, and we've built out often a visualization capability on top of the data that they had that they could then use and say, oh yeah, now this decision just jumps out and I know what to do.
Yeah. So how broadly does this extend, Manav? Do you, it sounds like it encompasses analytics, maybe, advanced analytics, as some people call it, and AI. Do you wrap sort of business intelligence under this banner of products as well? Or is that a separate group or?
No, so we have BI groups that are embedded in the business, and I wanted them to be there so that they could do the quick, request response kind of work for them, for the business leaders. But we do a certain amount of BI work in our services work stream because it enables us to really understand what's happening on the business side, and it helps us give insights to the business leaders, which can then eventually turn into data products for us.
And have you been doing that for long enough so you can see it's a pretty good way to identify data product candidates?
Yes, it does provide us, so a good area is our contact center. And they wanted greater insights into the operational efficiency of the contact center. We've invested in doing a services engagement around that with them, but it's given us so much insight into what's happening in the contact center. So we've now got ideas on how to transform the contact center using data and analytics in a more of a data product approach.
Interesting. So banks, I guess, are relatively sophisticated in data analytics AI because they have so much data typically. Would you try to apply this product focus in pretty much any kind of company, do you think, or does it have to have a pretty high level of capabilities to start with to make that work?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a capability issue. I think it's more some of the aspects that I was talking about in terms of sponsorship, mindset, and you may have to start small, build a small data product first, so get the right data together, and then build a product for them. So I think the success criteria are more determined by some of those other dimensions that I mentioned, rather than a sophistication and capability necessarily.
That's interesting. Yeah, I just noticed, I think all of the data products you've mentioned so far have been for internal use only, pretty much. Do you ever do any that customers would actually see in some fashion?
Great question, and you're right. All the ones that we've delivered right now are for internal customers, so to speak. But we have a few that are in the works that will be exposed to both our consumer customers as well as some of our commercial customers. We're still working on those. It's a much higher hurdle to jump over to get something that will actually be in the hands of the customers. So we're in the process of getting those aspects worked out, but it's definitely on our plans.
Okay, and are you finding that the data product partners have a lot of kind of process re-engineering, redesign to do, as well as the analytics and AI stuff for the receiving organization?
Yeah, again, we look at it from an end-to-end perspective, and so we want to deliver a full solution to whatever problem we've taken on, and if that involves process components that have to be enhanced, we will take that on. Now, they will pull in resources with the right skill set to be able to make sure we deliver a high quality product. We don't do everything ourselves, so we pull in people from technology, from operations, from whatever is necessary. But our goal is to deliver a full product that solves a complete problem.
Okay, and that would also include the data product partners are responsible for integration with the existing systems too.
Yeah, and again, they won't do it themselves, but they will then go and say, well, so and so in the technology group, we need this integrated into, let's say, our Salesforce solution, and then they will bring together those tasks into our product backlog and then manage it just like tasks related to analytics and AI.
You have mentioned that you have several of these. I don't know if you want to give away the number of data product partners you have, but could you give people some idea of how many of these you need relative to other jobs? I was talking to DBS Bank recently in Singapore, and they were saying, well, they don't have this role, but they do have translators, and they try to have one translator for every 2 data scientists. I don't know. Have you ever thought about any ratios like that?
Yeah, no, so it's not ratio to data scientists necessarily. It's alignment with opportunities. So with each of our business units, we have 1, sometimes 2 or 3 data product partners that will get aligned to them, depending on the number of opportunities that exist there. And then each data product partner, once we've identified an opportunity, prioritized it, put it on our roadmap, will assemble the right team structure to go and solve that problem. So it may require 2 data scientists, it may require 4, 6, but then it may require more technology resources, more digital UX resources. So it's a mix for each data product that we take on.
Oh, that's very interesting. So Jason, I don't know, we're approaching the time when you said you wanted to do some more Q&A. I've asked a few, but there are a lot more. How do you want to handle that?
Yeah, sure. Let's yeah, we have some great questions here in the chat. So why don't we turn to some of the questions. So one that came through here, Manav, is how did you design a program that scaled beyond the number of data product managers? Brian offered some interesting insight here around this question. He said it's critical all the makers have respect for and some exposure to the users and stakeholders in the last mile. Otherwise, it's very hard to scale because the PMs and the UX people become the only folks who really get it or have empathy. Do you have anything to add to that in terms of scalability?
So I'm not sure I understand all aspects of that question, but I'll make a few comments there. So I agree that it is important for the whole team to get that proximity and an understanding of the business problems, but also that positive feedback that comes from the solution of that problem. So we do get our data scientists, our data engineers, our data visualization folks involved in some of those conversations with the business. As far as scalability beyond the data product partner, there are two aspects there. So one is we need to be able to scale to all the opportunities, and that's partially a function of the amount of funding that we can procure to get things built out. But then that holistic team working on a problem gives that scalability so that it's not just the data product partner who becomes the bottleneck and has to do all the work across the various stakeholders. So our data scientists, data engineers, all of them are, I have a meeting with all our teams so that they can communicate to me, but then we also bring them into our conversations. We have quarterly steering committee meetings with our business leaders, so we bring them there as well.
Gotcha. Great. Okay, so let's see. Here's another one. How do you ensure that junior members of product owners, of the product owners team are motivated? How do you ensure that they're motivated? They want to do hands-on modeling, but spend a lot of their time, in writing the user stories, user support, and stakeholder management. So that question of motivation, it's a good one.
Yeah, and we are asking not only our data scientists, our data engineers, the data visualization, as well as the data product partners to do a lot, right? So they're doing much more than they would if they were just doing siloed work. But motivation comes directly from the impact that they're having, and getting them excited about they're solving a real problem. They're getting to see the value it's delivering. They're getting to hear from the business owners. I mean, we did a road show at one of our senior leaders meetings where we had a booth set up, and our team members were there explaining what they'd done to not only their stakeholders, but then other people from the bank. And it was very cool to see that some of the business owners were there standing next to our team members and explaining what an amazing job that they'd done. And then, like I said, all of that just provides a tremendous amount of great energy and motivation to the team.
Okay, great. Thank you. So the next
Jason,
question.
can I ask a question that somebody else brought up in the chat, and it was really interesting to me?
Yeah.
Manav, how do you think of the, there's this discussion, I think it's more discussion than reality. It's about the, empowering the citizen data scientists within the organization. How does that fit? You said you were going to do self-service, but that sounded like it was more for BI kind of work. Are you trying to, move to auto ML and so on for citizens to create models?
So I'm not completely bought in on that just yet. I think modeling does require a level of understanding where you have a depth of understanding of what modeling technique, et cetera, is appropriate. But I think it's more than BI. There are insight generation tools that we want to give them access to, but it isn't so much building a model, but it's anomaly detection or trending, forecasting, those kinds of things, which have some sophisticated mathematics behind it, but they're not having to choose parameters and make changes like that.
Great, thank you.
Great. So there's a question around metrics. Are there any metrics that the business process owners plan to use for adoption of data products? How do you think about going from these nice fancy objects to really something that becomes part of the DNA?
Yeah, and as I mentioned, my tenet of measure everything. And the metrics are dependent on the specific data product, but certainly usage of the data product. So for one of our data products, for instance, we do log analysis. We do a weekly report. So every quarterly steering committee. There are reports about how many people logged in on a weekly basis, what pages they went to, how much they, how many new pipelines they generated, what were the pipelines that closed. All of that kind of analysis is built into the data product design so that we can report on it effectively to the business steering committee, but then measure our success against it as well.
Okay, great. Do you restrict citizen scientists that aren't in the centralized function from creating their own data products?
I would say yes, not so much as a matter of control, but I think, again, we've built out a series of best practices and consistent approaches to doing this, and to try and do this outside. I don't think at least Regions is at the level of sophistication and maturity for them to go off and do this completely on their own. We would still want to assign a data product partner to get that built out from our side, and then they would have significant involvement and they would participate very heavily, but we want to make sure that we're bringing the benefits of all the best practices we've put in over here.
Okay, all right.
Can I ask one other question, Jason, that I meant to ask earlier, but didn't?
Please.
Manav, do the data product partners have ongoing responsibility for retraining models when necessary and monitoring drift and that kind of thing?
So they, as owners of the product, will, but they don't have the skill set necessarily to do that. So our data engineering team, which is our data platforms team, has put in tools for model monitoring and alerts for when retraining has to be done. But then it's a data scientist who would actually do the retraining of those models.
ML ops kinds of tools.
Yes, exactly.
Place.
So we've really invested a lot in that, and that's extremely important from my mindset.
Okay, all right, time for one more, and then we'll close up shop here. So how important is explainability when it comes to internal adoption?
Very, very important given the industry we're in. How important is it to regulators is another question.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have a number of assurance functions to the work that we do. We have our risk organization, we have our internal audit, and then we have regulators. And explainability is critically important to all of them. So we've actually brought in a specific tool to address explainability of all the work that we do. So extremely important, and we're investing in it.
Okay, excellent. Well, thanks again, both of you, Tom and Manav. That was an excellent discussion. Thanks everybody who joined the call today and asked great questions. I think we got to most of them. We will be sharing the recording of this webinar in an email tomorrow, and it will also be available on our website. Stay tuned on our email and social media channels for other upcoming blogs, webinars, new episodes of our leading analytics podcast and other content. Related to today's discussion, as you can see on the slide here, IIA's Research and Advisory Network has a number of frameworks and practical guides and access to unbiased experts to help you apply a product orientation at your organization. Check it out, contact us if you're interested in learning more about our research and advisory service. All right, thanks again, everybody, and have a great day.
Thanks, Manav.
Thank you. Thanks, Tom.